Okay, Prabhu, you can start.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shaunaka Vacha. Yad ahano bhavan suta shatta bhagavato uttama chachara tirthani bhuvas tyaktya bandhun sudushtya jan. I'm going to read the three verses one after the other, so please bear with me. Translations for this verse. Shaunaka Vacha. Sri Shaunaka Muni said, Yat, as, aha, you said, na, unto us, bhavan, your good self, suta, O suta, shatta, vidura, bhagavata, uttama, one of the topmost devotees of the Lord, chachara, practiced, tirthani, places of pilgrimage, bhuvaha, on the earth, tyaktva, leaving aside, bandhum, all relatives, Sudushtyajan, very difficult to give up. Translation. Sri Saunaka Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Suta Goswami about Vidura. For Suta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The rishis, headed by Saunaka, were more anxious to know about Vidura, who met Maitreya Rishi while traveling to the pilgrimage sites of the world. So I'm reading the next verse, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 10, 49 through 50. Shatu kausharve satasya samvado dhyatma samshritaha yadva sa bhagavam tasmai rishtas tattvam uvachaha bruhi nastad idam saumya vidurasya vicheshtitam bandhu tyaga nimittam cha yatheva gatavan punaha. Translation, actually synonyms, Kshattuhu, of Vidura, Kausharveha, as that of Maitreya, Tasya, there, Samvadaha, news, Adhyatma, in the matter of transcendental knowledge, Samshritaha, full of, Yat, which, Va, anything else, Saha, he, Bhagavan, his grace, Tasmai, unto him, Prishta, inquired, Tattvam, the truth, Uvacha, answered, Ha, in the past, Bruhi, please tell, Na, unto us, Tat, those matters, Idam, here, Saumya, O gentle one, Vidurasya, of Vidura, Vicheshtitam, activities, Bandhu Tyaga, renouncing the friends, Nimittam, the cause of, Cha, also, Yatha, as, Eva, also, Agatavan, came back, Puna, again, at home. Translation. Shaunaka Rishi said, let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection of his family members and why he again came home. Please also let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the place of pilgrimage. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai. Sri Shruta Goswami was narrating the topics of the creation and destruction of the material world. But it appeared that the rishis headed by Shaunaka were more inclined to hear of transcendental subjects which are on a higher level than the physical. There are two classes of men, namely those too addicted to the gross body and the material world, and others on the higher level who are interested in more transcendental knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the matter of the Lord, let me repeat that. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the matter of the Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, men can derive equal benefit. The materialists are more interested in the physical laws and how they're acting and how they see wonders in those physical glamours. Sometimes, due to physical glamours, they forget the glories of the Lord. They should know definitely that physical activities and the wonders are all initiated by the Lord. The rose in the garden gradually takes its shape and color to become beautiful and sweet, not by a blind physical law, although it appears like that. Behind that physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, things cannot take shape so systematically. The artist draws a picture of a rose very nicely with all attention and artistic sense, and yet it does not become as perfect as the real rose. If that is the real fact, how can we say that the real rose has taken its shape without intelligence behind the beauty? This sort of conclusion is due to a poor fund of knowledge. One must know from the above description of creation and annihilation that the supreme consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. That is the fact of omnipresence of the Supreme Lord. Persons still more foolish than the gross materialists, however, claim to be transcendentalists and claim to have such supreme, all-pervading consciousness, but offer no proof. Such foolish persons cannot know what is going on behind the next wall, yet they are falsely proud of possessing the cosmic, all-pervading consciousness of the Supreme Person. For them also, hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is a great help. It will open their eyes to see that simply by claiming supreme consciousness, one does not become supremely conscious. One has to prove in the physical world that he has such supreme consciousness. The rishis of Naimisharanya, however, were above the gross materialists and the false transcendentalists, and thus they were always anxious to know the real truth in transcendental matters as discussed by authorities. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this cold Saturday morning, January 14th. Hope everyone's doing well, and thank you for joining us and being with us, and hopefully we'll have some good discussion during and after this class. So just to give you a little background, again, we're reading Canto 2, Chapter 10, texts 48, 49, and 50. So a little context here. We've come to the end of not only the chapter, but also to the end of Canto 2. So we're going to be starting Canto 3 from next class or the class after. The backdrop for this is that in the 10th chapter of the second canto, Sukadeva Goswami is elaborating on the 10 divisions covered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, what are those 10 divisions? A quick recap: the creation of the universe, subcreation, planetary systems, protection by the Lord, the creative impetus, the change of the manus, the science of God, returning home back to Godhead, liberation, and the summum bonum. Those are the 10 divisions that are covered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sukadeva Goswami is elaborating on those, and it will, these questions will come up again, these topics will be discussed again to reinforce our understanding and reinforce our faith as we continue to read the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the description of how the different body parts came into being by the desire of the Lord is clearly explained by Sukadeva Goswami here in this chapter. And with these descriptions, we're being made aware that Krishna is not only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's also a person and he has a form. And that Krishna is supremely independent and he is a person. So with that, we can, get started into or delve a little deeper into these three verses that we're discussing today. So in these verses, Shaunaka Rishi is asking about Vidura and his meeting with Maitreya Muni. What was the nature of the conversation? What was Maitreya's response to that? Why did Vidura leave his family and go on pilgrimage? Why did he return after his long pilgrimage? It clearly, it demonstrates the eagerness of these great souls to hear about Krishna and his associates. You would wonder, how would one be so eager and not just patient, right? Especially when there is so much to do. Look at the setting, right? These rishis are on their journey, I would say, there in Naimisharanya, doing their 1,000-year yagya. There's so much to do. When I reflect that, when I reflect upon that in my own personal situation as the day begins, I'm getting ready for the onslaught of work. I'm hearing the Bhagavatam from the wonderful Vaishnavas on this call, right, almost on a daily basis. But my mind is already running helter-skelter. There's so much to do today. That's what my mind is telling me. There's so much to do today. There's so much to do today. We're so embroiled by this, the temporary, that we don't consider the insignificance of all this running around just to put two morsels of food in our mouth. We don't consider the big picture of who we really are and what it is to become, what is to become of us after this material life. Imagine, with just a few piddly years of our lifetime, we may last 50, 60, or even 80 years. And we're so hung up with all the things that we have to do. Now, what to say about the rishis at Naimisharanya? They've gathered to perform 1,000-year sacrifice. Just imagine the whole scale and magnitude and the specifics and of everything that they have to perform. There is so much more, exponentially more than what we have to do over a span of 50 years that we are cribbing. They have 1,000 years of work ahead of them. So they could have simply paid their respects to Suta Goswami and carried on with their 1,000-year sacrifice without blinking an eye, right? Because Suta Goswami was, after all, passing through the forest of Naimisharanya, where the rishis were there and performing their 1,000-year sacrifice. Instead, they took the time to hear from a great devotee, the highest knowledge, without giving the slightest excuse for, within quotes, so much to do. I have so much to do. Okay, back to this verse. So after the battle of Kurukshetra, after all the dust settled, King Yudhishthira was enthroned as the emperor of the world, of Bharatvarsha, by Krishna. And in time, Krishna's family were, by design, eliminated or annihilated, whatever term you use, by him at Prabhasa in the form of a curse by the Brahmanas earlier. So after accepting, the prasada or the remnants of the food offered to the Brahmanas that were present, the Vrishnis, and this is post-Kurukshetra that I'm talking about, not about the earlier curse where the Brahmanas cursed the young, sons of the Vrishnis that were playing the fool, pretended, that one of them was pregnant. and they were actually making fun, and so they were having fun at the not knowing that they were actually causing more trouble and mischief. Ended up being cursed, and fast forward, the curse is now by the Brahmanas is now unfolding, and of course, all of that under the direction and the supreme plan of the Lord Himself, right? Because after Kurukshetra, if you think about it, there were 18 Akshahanis, which is like a massive, massive, several millions of soldiers that were involved in the battle of Kurukshetra. And Krishna, by design, annihilated, liberated all of those on the battlefield, right? So after that happened, he was still thinking to himself, oh, I have my Vrishni dynasty. I mean, I have 16,108 wives, and I have all these sons, right? So sons of mine that in themselves, he was thinking, would be a burden for this earth. But also, if I keep in mind that these were not ordinary sons, right? These were demigods. There were many of them were eternal associates. I mean, there were so many that all of them that were actually coming from the spiritual world on Krishna's instructions. So this was a way for Krishna to close up and wrap up his pastimes. And so this was getting towards that end of that chapter in his pastime. So this was Krishna's plan to end his pastimes. So he advises his dear friend and cousin Uddhava to leave for Bhadrikashrama, to take, actually to Dwaraka, to take, all the wives that were in Dwaraka and the residents of Dwaraka, move them to Bhadrikashrama so that they would be safe from, what was impending at Dwaraka. But here at Prabhasa were all of the sons of Krishna who had reveled and indulged in intoxication. And by Krishna's design, they started to say strong words against each other, hurt each other, not only through words, but that soon, deteriorated into fist fighting and actually killing each other. And that ended up in all of them killing each other, and, poof, all the Vrishnis were gone, the sons. So then Krishna retracted to an isolated place on the banks of the Ganges. And Uddhava, who is so dearmost to Krishna, is there right by his side, and he's seeing all of this happen, and he comes to Krishna and he gets the instructions that, Uddhava, you being my most confidential devotee, please carry out my instruction. And Krishna tells him, please take all the wives, the queens of Dwaraka to Bhadrikashrama. Now, Uddhava also knows that by doing so, he was never going to see Krishna again on this material world. So this was, unfolding in his mind, and Uddhava being such an ardent devotee of the Lord, couldn't bear that separation, right? That separation was just far too much. And as it is, the situation was already melancholic. But Krishna being Krishna and being so dear to Uddhava, it was very, very difficult for Uddhava to leave Krishna, knowing that he was not going to see Krishna again in the same place in this material world. So reluctantly, he was starting to leave. And even then, he was like, Krishna, please don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. And he sees Krishna and he's admiring the beauty of Krishna, even sitting there, even though, like I said, it was so melancholic, so sad, the whole scene. Krishna's beauty was overwhelmingly blissful. And nevertheless, Uddhava, on Krishna's instructions, leaves for Bhadrikashrama. And as he leaves, he also meets Vidura on the banks of the Yamuna. So again, that's by Krishna's plan, of course. So Vidura asks Uddhava to impart knowledge that transcends illusory material life, right? He's talking about, the higher things in life, higher aspects in life. But of course, he first inquires about Krishna. He first inquires about all his relatives and, what is happening there. But he also, moves on to talking about the bigger picture. And that's the big picture that we in our daily, busy, insignificant lives, we forget about the big picture. But here are these great personalities. And what do great personalities discuss when they meet? They inquire about each other, yes, but then also, they focus and discuss in terms of discussing the glories of the Lord, the pastimes of the Lord, the purpose of life, the higher aspects which transcend all of these illusory activities that we have and that we're surrounded and overwhelmed by in this material world. So Uddhava is very respectful. He accepts Vidura because Vidura is much older to him, right, in age. And so Uddhava pays all respects to Vidura and, gives him a brief update. But then he also tells him, oh, dear Vidura, please speak to Maitreya because Maitreya Muni, the great Maitreya Muni, is very nearby. And he was also given this knowledge, the same knowledge, by the Lord himself. So please speak with him, talk to him, hear from him, ask him your questions. And, I have to now be on my way to fulfill and complete the instructions given by the Lord. So I need to head off to Badrikashrama. So Vidura pays his respects as well to Uddhava, and then he makes his way to the banks of Yamuna. From the banks of the Yamuna to the banks of the Ganges, where Maitreya Muni is in deep meditation. There, Maitreya Muni, he's a very, very elevated personality, as we know, right? He welcomes Vidura and he informs Vidura, Vidura, I'm so happy to have you here, but I also know this is the truth behind your birth, and starts to talk about who Vidura is and where Vidura came from, what's his lineage and so on. Because if you remember, Vidura left from the palace where he was insulted by his own relatives, right? Duryodhana, in the presence of Karna and Shakuni and the others, insulted Vidura so badly because the tempers were very high, and Duryodhana, being Duryodhana, said, Vidura, you're constantly supporting the Pandavas. We don't know if you're living with us, but at the same time, you're supporting the Pandavas, who are our enemies here. So you are a spy. You're really a spy. And so he says very harsh words. And he even says, oh, Vidura, you're the son of a maidservant. He turns around to Karna and says, Vidura is the son of a maidservant. Why is he here? Get him out of this palace. Just leave him with his breath. Strip him off of all his titles and everything and just let him go. So Vidura does not retaliate. He's a great personality. He does not react. Instead, he responds by putting his bow down, and he leaves the palace immediately. He doesn't go back to his residential quarters. He doesn't pack his tote bag. None of that, right? He just leaves right out of the palace. He leaves for pilgrimage from there. And after that, Vidura is on his way. He's not thinking about all this. He says, there's a higher plan. This is all for my good, for my purification. See, the thought process that he goes through is completely different than what Duryodhana and the rest of his gang were, up to. Vidura was thinking about, oh, this is a perfect time. Krishna is basically telling me to, or reminding me that I should be thinking of him and be absorbed in him. So he goes to various places of pilgrimage, completely absorbed in the Lord. So he's further purifying himself. He's already a great devotee. It's not that when he's asking these questions to Uddhava or he's asking these questions to Maitreya, Vidura doesn't know. Vidura is a great, great personality. He's already a very realized person. And so Maitreya Muni reminds him and tells him, Vidura, you were Lord Yamaraj himself in your previous life. But due to a curse by Mandavya Muni, Mandavya Muni was another great personality. And at the end of his life, he appeared before Yamaraj. And Yamaraj said, hey, when you were a child, you actually pierced a little creature. I think it was a lizard or something like that. And you watched it suffer and die. So for that sin that you committed, other than that, he had not committed any other sins. Mandavya Muni was a very, very pure devotee of the Lord as well. So for having committed that one crime, Lord Yamaraj said, I'm going to have you pierced by a spear. So you realize the pain that you caused that poor innocent creature. To which Mandavya Muni, was so angered that he cursed Yamaraj and said, hey, but I was only a child. I didn't know better at that point in time. So how can you do this? This is extremely unfair. And so he curses Yamaraj and he says, you're going to be born as a Shudra in your next life. And so Yamaraj is forced to take birth as a Shudra in his next life. So in another pastime, Satyavati, she begets two sons, one through Parasara Muni and one through King Shantanu. And keep in mind, King Shantanu was none other than the father of Bhishma Dev. Okay? So just keep that in mind because that lineage is very important. Now from Parasara Muni, she had a son who was none other than Vyasadev. Interesting, right? So Satyavati had two sons. One son was through King Shantanu, okay, and the other son was through Parasara Muni, okay. Now from Parasara Muni, Vyasadeva was born, and from King Shantanu, Satyavati gave birth to Vichitravirya, okay. So Vyasadeva and Vichitravirya were essentially stepbrothers. And then fast forward, due to whatever reason, Vichitravirya, as I recall, couldn't have children. So Vyasadeva had a union with Vichitravirya's kept wife, who was a maidservant. And from them came Vidura. So Vidura came from a very high parentage and a very high position as king, as Yamaraj, right? In his previous life, in service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he was not an ordinary being by any means. And so this is why Vidura is being described by Shruta Goswami as a Bhagavata Uttama. So the topmost devotee of the Lord. He was such a pure devotee that he gave up everything, his riches, his comforts of the palace, and even his family. Even his family, something that is so difficult. Sudhishthyajan, right? So something that is so difficult, as it is mentioned in this verse. I mean, just to reflect personally, even, right? When I first landed in the US, back in the day, eons ago, I landed in Seattle, and I was so, when I woke up, the flight stopped, and I mean, we were at the airport at the gate, and I was, rudely awakened by the flight attendant because I'd fallen asleep. And this was my first international travel, and I was so jet lagged. And when I awoke, I was the last person on the flight, and when I looked out the window, I could see, the beautiful, beautiful scenery around me. And I was in Seattle, the ice-capped mountains of Mount Hood and so on. So this was so beautiful that I was taken aback. And, the thought that stuck in my mind was, this is a place where I would like to retire. And sure enough, as I started my life at the university in Portland, very close to Seattle, the place was so beautiful. The Northwest is so beautiful that it just, took my breath away. I was so enamored by that. And and this was a long time ago, right? When I was during my younger years. Fast forward, got married. Richard and I started a family, moved to the Midwest, and I would tell my wife, I would say, Richard, we should retire in the Northwest, in Seattle or in Portland. And this not realizing, and this was again before came to Krishna consciousness, and then we had children, and they grew up in Krishna consciousness, and now they have children, and now they're all around us, which is so nice. I mean, this is like a blessing, and we have all these wonderful Vaishnavas. We have this wonderful, wonderful project that we started on more than 20 years ago, and that is coming to fruition here. We're seeing this beautiful, beautiful temple that through the blessings of Srila Prabhupada and our spiritual master and Krishna's mercy, we're getting a temple of our own, right, for the community and for our congregation. So now the plans are completely changed. Now you tell us, can we leave everything and can we go and settle in Seattle just because we liked it at that point in time? It's going to be a real hard one. That's going to be very, very, very difficult for us to do, personally, right? Sudhushtyajan. I like that term because it is very, very difficult given what we've been given through the causeless mercy of such pure Vaishnavas. It is very, very difficult. We've been blessed with these wonderful gifts, which we don't realize, right? I mean, even now, as I'm saying it, that complete realization hasn't dawned on me. I'm just scratching the surface, and even that is so overwhelming, personally. So as this temple comes into being, comes into fruition, we will see, how beautiful it is and how blessed we are to be a part of Krishna's family and how we can serve Krishna together. Okay, enough about me here, but the introduction into the next cantos is, the introduction of Vidura and how he meets Maitreya and how he asks these brilliant questions to Maitreya and how beautifully Maitreya responds to all of those questions and continues to elaborate on what we're hearing from the other devotees and other Vaishnavas, as Sukadeva Goswami beautifully relates it to us. So stay tuned. And this is all I had to share today. It was going to be a short class, but again, because I didn't want to steal the thunder of the next canto. But this is such a beautiful, beautiful chapter by itself. There is so much that we can learn from it. I mean, there is so much to do with science. And talking about science, the scientists are thinking that they know it all, or, and they have such limited knowledge. And one thing, though, over the years, at least over the last decade or so, it's becoming even more evident that even these scientists are starting to admit. They're saying it's becoming very evident that we have limited knowledge. There's much, much more that we don't know. There is so much more that we don't know in, outside of this Earth, the planet that we call Earth. So much more that we don't know that is beyond our universe. And when you look at it, they're even admitting that we know only so much about our own Earth, for that matter, right? If you look at it, the Earth covers only 30% of the planet. 70% is underwater, which means, and we've hardly, explored the depths. There are depths of the ocean that if you were to turn them upside down, the Grand Canyon would look like a tiny little hill. It's that deep when you go, and we haven't been able to go down to those depths. And we also have evidence that there is life even at those extreme depths where light just cannot penetrate. where the pressures are so high, they can burst our skulls like as though they were not even a mustard seed, I would say. Just like bubbles, soap bubbles. The pressures are so high that, nothing can technically be alive if you look at it in one sense, but yet there is evidence of life. There are fish and other creatures that live at those depths in the total absence of light, in the presence of extreme pressures and very harsh conditions. It is so cold, the temperatures are so cold that it's sub-zero. So what to speak of what the scientists know about not only our earth but also beyond our earth and the universe. So as we're learning through the Bhagavatam, this is descending knowledge as opposed to ascending knowledge. So what we learn in school is we learn the ABCs, we learn the numbers, we learn addition, and then we build on that and build on that and build on that to get to a point where we're doing some, serious vector calculus and what have you, before we can even create or come up with some equations, mathematical equations to predict, and see the world around us. So that is very, very limited, and that's ascending knowledge. Whereas through the Bhagavatam, we're getting descending knowledge, people that have already seen it, who know it, the Mahatattvas. These people, are Tattva Darshanis who've actually seen all of this. So they've been imparted the knowledge, and they're in turn mercifully imparting that knowledge to us. So it is up to us to receive it in the right way, see it in the right perspective. Yes, we're living in this modern world. Yes, we still have to deal with the people around us at work, at school, in the supermarket, wherever, right? In public places. Their perspectives may be different, but we need to understand that we are so blessed that we have this higher knowledge. So therefore, our lenses have to change through which we are looking at this universe around us. The ascending knowledge we're getting through the Srimad Bhagavatam is telling us, hey, you don't have to try and have this guesswork done or that guesswork done, this mathematical equation or that calculation done. Here it is, plain and simple, right? And all of this is being given to us in even more simplistic terms through, the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So all we have to do is, have an open mind, have an open heart, so that we can receive all of this and, focus on the right things. Look at the big picture and focus on the right things, which is how do we perfect our life so that we can, go back to the spiritual world. And that's through proper hearing and through all the devotional services. How do we perfect our devotional services so we can serve the Lord and completely, get out of this mess that we're in? So with that, let me stop and see if there's any discussion, any questions. The silence could mean that you're in violent agreement, or I've done a real poor job of elaborating this verse.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my obeisances. All goes to Raja Prabhupada. Prabhu, no, it's always nice to hear your classes. I was a little bit in and out, but some of the points that I captured or I thought were really, pertinent to me is one is this point of eagerness you talked about in the beginning, that how we need to have this eagerness, like our acharyas describe it, this lolium, this greed of wanting to serve the Lord. But this eagerness, is always because I understand in this mixed platform or this unsteady phase, it goes up and down. Eagerness, enthusiasm. So, I know I oftentimes ask the same question, but, how to maintain this eagerness because we do get wrapped around in our day-to-day activities and the material. I feel like this bombardment of material life is so prominent, especially in America, that I find it difficult, to be honest with you, sometimes. So if you can share something on that point. And the second thing, from what you were sharing about is Uddhava knowing that he's never going to see Krishna again, right? So I was just thinking that even for us, when our loved ones depart from this world, it's so painful. It's such a painful experience. Then obviously what to speak of this transcendental emotions or love that Uddhava and Krishna has. So of course we can't even comprehend, Uddhava's this transcendental pain, so to speak, in knowing that he's never going to see Krishna in this material world again. So anyway, Prabhu, if you, just those 2 points that, were kind of connecting to what, from what you shared. So Prabhu, if you want to share something about this eagerness further, it would be nice.
Sure, Mataji. Thank you so much. Wonderful questions, very introspective, very profound. Thank you for that. I will perhaps answer your second one first, because the second one is very true, and in a sense that not that the first one isn't, both are very true, but let me answer your second one first, and that was about how difficult it is, to leave this body, and contrasting that with Uddhava seeing Krishna for the last time, right, in this material world. Now, Krishna also tells Uddhava, this is your last life, my dear friend. So, that in itself gives so much strength, because think about it. When I'm sure you get birthday messages, wishes, blessings from our spiritual master, right? So on my birthdays, I look forward to that note I get from, my Guru Maharaj, where he says, one day closer to Krishna. And of course, there's other things that he says, but I'm saying the essence is you're not getting one day older, you're getting one day closer to Krishna. We tend to forget that, right? That is a very important aspect that we need to carry in our hearts every time, which is, yes, we're getting older, but we are actually getting closer and closer to Krishna with every passing day. At least that should be our objective. And, and that leads to the first question that you had. But I'd like to complete this thought, which is, as we're leaving this body, we should inculcate, we should, train our minds to recognize that, hey, this is actually a good thing that's happening to us. This is not only a good thing, it's a great thing that is happening to us. Contrary to all the impulses that we've been trained to, right? We're conditioned to, I have to take care of my my last few breaths, even to, through my last few breaths, so that I can hang on and prolong my life for a few moments, right? We need to somehow fight that impulse. Instead, try and refocus that impulse into, or rechannel that energy into thinking about Krishna, and how really, really merciful, how blessed we are in terms of being able to even think about Krishna, to enter into that realm, right? We may or may not be in the spiritual world physically, to speak, when we leave these bodies. Who knows, right? Where we are and what we're going to be doing in our next life. We may not be, depending on our journeys, our individual independent journeys, we may be at different places. But that doesn't take away the whole truth that Krishna is with us, and we're in his presence, no matter where and how, and all of those unanswered questions we may have, especially at the time of death. So that puts us in a very, very nice, blissful spot. And if we can get ourselves to think like that all the time, then when the actual final exam comes, it would be, I would think, so much easier, or I should say less difficult for us to think about Krishna at that point in time, to say, hey, this is a great thing that is happening to us. We are now moving into the part of the next stage of our spiritual journey where we're getting closer to Krishna. And just by thinking about that should give us the courage to face, this transmigration that we all are put through. No one is spared, right? So that's, your answer to your second question, at least my response, my, limited realization. Now, which means to answer your first question, how do we have these, have that level of eagerness which is steady, is a challenge that we all face. So welcome to the club, right? We're all a part of that not so happy club where things keep going up and down, up and down, up and down, even moment by moment, what to speak of day by day, week by week, and so on. And but the nice thing is when you look back 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and you see, where you were and where you are now, you're in a much, 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 we're all in a much better place, right, than we were. Yes, challenges have been there and will continue to be there. Even till our dying day, we will continue to be there, but that's the nature of Maya. I mean, so what did Prabhupada said? He said, you make the best use of the bad bargain that we've been dealt with. We're here in this material world. There's nothing we can do about that. But we have to accept that. We have to tolerate that. Even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Tolerate it. It's not that we suddenly become a pure devotee and we're completely we've transcended and we don't feel anything and we're just thinking about Krishna spotlessly and spontaneously. We're not there, and it's going to take a long, 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 long time to do that. But he's also telling us that, hey, we all know that Krishna knows where we are, what we're dealing with, and how tiny we are dealing with this, huge external energy, infinitely large external energy of his. So he's saying, I am there. I'm giving you. Buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. He says, you just engage yourself in bhajatam priti purvakam. He says, you just engage yourself in devotional service. I will give you the knowledge. I am there with you. Why are you worrying? Don't worry about it. I am there. I will take care of you, even in the last verse of the Bhagavad Gita, right? So that he will give us. Now, having said that, the eagerness, so that takes care of the fluctuation part of it, right? So we need to accept that fluctuation, that volatility, that up and down that we are all put through. It's not just you, not just me, it's everybody in this material world. Every living creature and living entity is going through that, period. There's nobody that is free from that. That is why our preceptors were constantly engaged and always in the association of devotees. When we are engaged in the association of devotees or in devotional activities, we are being protected from this volatility. So even Maya steps aside with folded hands because she knows it's very difficult for her to penetrate that bubble that we are in, and that bubble is the bubble that we want to be in. Now, granted, that bubble is something that we cannot carry with ourselves everywhere we go, right? Especially when we're at work. There is so much, like I was saying, the mind is such a rascal. It's always telling us, oh, yeah, that's all fine, but let's put that aside for now. We have other things to do, right? That's what this whole thing, when I started this discussion this morning, that's that mentality of the mind that we need to, train. And that takes a lot of practice. Abhyasa yoga yuktena, which Krishna says, chetasananagamina, right? So we have to train our minds systematically. I mean, that is going to be mechanical initially. And that's why the Vaidhi Bhakti that we are, is very, very, very regulative and very mechanistic in the sense we have to follow these 4 regulative principles to the T. We have to force ourselves to be in the association of devotees and to perform the devotional, activities so that we can get into that frame of mind. For me personally, what has worked is through hearing. I've noticed the days that I miss out on the hearing, it gets so dry and I get so caught up at work that I'm, thinking about work and nothing else. And my mood changes. I'm a different person. It's almost like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So it's like a split personality. And then I catch myself, and then I sometimes have to force myself. Oh, I have to hear. I hear Ruchira listening, hearing lectures in the mornings, evenings, whenever she has free time, she is. And I'm running around here, and this is all between all the activities that she's doing. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, how is she doing this when I'm also having, equally busy activities on the work end, but I don't have that taste. So sometimes I have to force myself. And there are days that I go, or days on end that I go like a dry camel, carrying these heavy loads. And then I catch myself doing that, and then I force myself initially. But when I start hearing, I mean, the whole mood changes. When you're chanting, your whole mood changes. When you hear yourself chant, you get into that mood, after maybe not in round one or round two, or sometimes not even round eight. But when you get to round 9, 10, and beyond, you start to get absorbed. Automatically, the mind becomes calm. You're in a state where you're able to perceive things a lot better. You're in a much, much higher plane than the gross material plane where you're getting pulled in 10 different directions. So getting yourself to quieten your mind. The mind, like I said, is a rascal, as we all know, right? It's running in 10 different directions all the time. So we need to tell the mind, hey, calm down, calm down. And if we tell the mind that, it gets even more perturbed. So better to, redirect, rechannel, focus on your chanting, focus on hearing some lectures, right? Focus on reading the Bhagavatam. Do something like that which resonates, and not everything resonates with everybody, right? Some people would love to cook instead, make prasadam, right? Make bhoga and offer it so that they can have prasadam. So that may be more appealing to some, and that may resonate much better for some than the others. So do things that resonate with you, which are devotionally inclined, which are in that service to Krishna. Start thinking about, not start, but keep nurturing that relationship with Krishna. It's a personal relationship, right? You have the association of devotees, which helps you build that faith, build that interest, right? But still, it boils down to your personal relationship with Krishna. If you give that attention, then Krishna is there. He's already there. He doesn't have to try or travel millions of miles from where he is, or billions and billions of miles from where he is. He's already there with you. He's within us. So he sparks that eagerness, and he keeps that eagerness going. And so we continue to fan it from our side. All we need to do is fan that, as Guru Maharaj would say. So let's just continue doing that. And how we do that is, like I said, do things that resonate well with us and keeps us in that zone where it's easier for us to think about Krishna. And automatically the taste will come. And of course, we are not at a stage where that taste will remain and we can sustain. It will go again because Maya is so strong. But like I said, if we continue with that, continue, following the regulative principles, then it becomes a little easier. And with time, that eagerness will start to fluctuate less. It's not going to go away completely, ever. Like I said, even Srila Prabhupada would constantly pray. He would constantly pray. And people, his disciples would ask him, Prabhupada, why are you, we see you're so intense when you're praying. What are you praying for? You're already there, right? In other words. And Prabhupada says, hey, I'm praying desperately, begging that I be protected by the Lord from Maya, from the external energy, that I don't fall down. That is the mood, that is the seriousness, that is the intensity that we need to have within us. That's the spiritual anxiety that we need to inculcate, and get away from the, the material anxiety that we're otherwise dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Getting to that point requires faith, requires association of devotees, requires chanting and hearing. So hearing is probably, as I'm hearing and, as I'm understanding that a little better, hearing is the way that can give us all of these benefits. It leads to other things. And our chanting will improve automatically. And again, hearing, chanting, hearing, they build on each other. But we need to have that initial faith, which we force ourselves, like going to the gym, for instance. Going to the gym is such a difficult thing, especially in the winter, right? You have to force yourself. But once you get to the gym, hey, you're doing things, you're exercising, you're going from one machine to the other, you're doing one workout after the other. So you get into the zone because everyone else is also doing it, and you get inspired, and it becomes easier for you to do what you have to do in the gym, right? Similarly, we have to exercise our spiritual muscle. And if we don't do that, our spiritual muscles, Maya is right there, 1/20th of a second, she's there to take care of that and say, time for me to completely disrupt your attention, take you away from what you really should be focused on, and I'm going to pull you away to the next best thing, next flashy object. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it is a combination of things that we have to inculcate. It takes a lot of training, a lot of practice, and reliance on Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes,
We
Prabhu.
have a stop at 8:30 because I think there is another call and it will be using this same channel.
Sure, Prabhu. Absolutely. So go on, Mohini. Prabhu, Mataji, I hope that kind of helps.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you.